Well, obviously, when it comes to AI, I've seen there are tons of, talks around AI, during yesterday and today, and I think different people touch upon different subjects on AI. But I think this session, we really want to make it fun. Me and Alexis here really try to make, AI kind of fun and sexy for everyone because frankly, I don't understand it. And even before I got assigned to interview Alexis, I freaked out because I've never interviewed a female leader in one of the biggest tech companies in the world, and I don't know anything about AI. So obviously, I asked ChatGPT to come up with some questions, and I was so happy with the results. I was like, damn, I sound very smart, very technical. All the sentences are so well written, right? But there's just one simple issue. It did not sound like me. So I actually came clean, right? To you, Alexis, during our catch-up session, I was like, listen, there are simple, superficial questions come from me, and the sophisticated one comes from chat. I just call him Chat, nickname. And Alexa's like, let's strip the complicated one and let's stick with the easy ones, right? So that's what.
But I love the honesty. Good for you for being open about the use of a tool. That's what we should be. That's how we learn about how to use it for other parts of our lives.
Absolutely. I guess that's just my attempt to use ChatGPT, right, as the AI tool in my life. And this really goes along to our topic today. How does AI transform our lives and shaping perspective for us? So, but before we start that, Alexis, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone? What do you do and your role within Intel?
Sure. I can't see all of you, so if I'm not looking at you, I apologize. So my name's Alexis Crowell. I've been with Intel for longer than I care to admit, but I've been in AI for about the last 10 years. I started in it kind of right as people were questioning whether or not we were allowed to say AI in public, or if that was going to freak people out, and it was the rise of the robots. So I've been in this space for a really long time. I absolutely love it. I'm a fundamental believer that it can make lives a whole lot better. But I'm now currently in the role of the CTO for Asia Pacific and Japan for Intel. So I get to see across all of technology, and then how does AI intersect or interweave with some of the other key core topics like sustainability, or how are we using it in gaming, what happens in music, and those types of things too.
Right. And obviously the topic is about our everyday lives, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
We would talk so much about it. Why don't you tell us what are the AI application that we use in everyday life? Is it transforming our life at the moment?
Well, it has been, right? Most people don't think about it, but if you use voice to text on your phone, you're using NLP. That's natural language processing. That is a form of AI, right? AI is actually this massive, all-encompassing set of technologies that just make things faster and more productive. If you've used autocomplete on your texting or in your email program, that's AI. Car companies are now putting cameras, actually better example, Domino's Pizza. One of my favorite examples, Domino's Pizza.
What are they doing with AI?
Yeah, they're making sure your pizza looks good and it actually is appetizing, right? So they had this whole problem where pizzas were coming off of their, very small shop lines and they looked awful, right? Like the tomatoes were wilted and nothing looked like the promos for the advertisements for this pizza. So they added a really simple camera, and the only thing the camera does is, hey, is it good or bad? Like, did you, Domino's Pizza franchise, actually make a product that your customers are going to want? They have since gone a whole lot farther, though. Now they can tell, if you're on their app, they can tell if what your previous orders are and your likelihood of completion of a new order. My favorite story from them is they had an order in Japan where the person ordering hadn't even hit pay yet, but they knew that person so well, the pizza showed up at the door of their condo before they had finished paying for it. That's how fast it could be. They've shaved off, I think, 13 minutes or something in, like a 30-minute window. That's a big time span on delivery because now they can understand you. So this hyper-personalization just totally exists.
Wow, that is very scary. And I never thought that my pizza needs to be pretty. I just eat it. But I mean, it makes sense for other people. And, during our catch-up session, you also mentioned the AI application in terms of cosmetics, right?
Yes.
Beauty industry. How does that work?
So there's an infinite number of shades of skin on this planet, right? And if you're someone who wears foundation, buying foundation is a complete and utter pain in the rear end, right? Because you can't match it. Now there's all these new tools like, okay, well, you can buy like 3 different shades and mix it together and you have to become an artist to match your face. That's insane. Instead, how about you use a camera? And you use a camera that can tell, within a certain variance, what skin color you have and which product is going to be best. And not even just one specific product line. It can actually look across MAC and Dior and pick your favorite brands and tell you, hey, for your skin type and skin tone, this is what you want. I think this is going to help a ton of people, especially those of us that online shop. I hate walking into stores. I don't know about you. Maybe you like it. If I can't buy it online, I'm not buying it. Like, that's just kind of the reality of my life. But you can't buy cosmetics online, it turns out, unless you use AI.
That is very true. I think I remember when I was in China, I've seen this company that does digital twin. Exactly. I think it was during the COVID period where they had to deal with a Cartier, and basically they're mimicking kind of the shop right within the metaverse. And then also they had this AI function. As soon as you put your hand underneath your phone camera, bam, you see the ring on your finger, you see like
Yes.
the bracelet on your around your wrist, and there's a buy button right next to it and just ask you to buy immediately. Right? That's just insane what they do with that, with the AI technology. And obviously you do have the appreciation for the brand yourself to begin with, right? And just induces you to buy. We also touched upon something around the healthcare industry and education. Why don't you tell us about that, the application in the healthcare?
So healthcare, I think, is probably the industry most poised to benefit from artificial intelligence, candidly. There are, if I just look at radiologists alone, so the people that actually read the scans, we are short about 180,000 radiologists in the world to read those scans and in a timely manner diagnose what's wrong. Everything from you have a broken wrist to no, you have cancer growing in some part of your body. AI can come in and they don't replace the doctors because the doctors don't actually exist.
So nobody's losing their jobs.
Nobody's losing their jobs in this. You're actually filling a void. And I think that's where AI has a really, really big opportunity in healthcare. There's such a big void that's why I'm really excited about it there. If you don't have a radiologist to read your scan, you're waiting an extra few days, an extra week, potentially maybe longer, depending upon where you live, to get that scan and to get a diagnosis. If it's a broken something, right, your body's already started to heal, so now you risk it healing incorrectly. If it's cancer, you've lost precious days to start your treatment. And that to me is a solvable problem, right? You can bring in capabilities that are doing that. And when you fuse AI into education, now you've got the opportunity for teenagers to start solving for some of this. So one of my favorite stories, and indulge me for just a second, there's a school in Thailand who's adopted some AI in their curriculum. They have now built a model to detect skin cancer. These are 15-year-olds. I mean, think about what that means in 10 to 15 years when they've gone through more schooling, they've got even more capabilities underneath them. Think about the problems we're going to solve. Like, to me, that is 100% how we shape lives, right? And give people a better chance at a future with the tools.
Right. I think the industry that you described actually has a very obvious impact in terms of shaping the perspectives, right? But I do feel like AI is everywhere. It is more or less our perspective has been shaped on our front. I think I actually had a great lesson. So every time my mom drives my car and every time I get a speeding ticket, I get a text message immediately. And I've learned it from the hard way and more expensive ways, right? Yeah. So, but I mean, we talk about the positive side of things, the utilizing AI in our everyday life in terms of efficiencies, right? In terms of making choices and making everything a lot more convenient for our lives. Well, what are the drawbacks that you see, utilizing AI in our life?
So we talk about responsible AI, and that to me is both the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest challenge, because responsibility is not just about, well, let me step back. The way artificial intelligence works is you get a decision based off of a ton of data input, right? So depending upon that data that's been input into this model or into this mathematical model, right? Because it's all matrix math. If that data is not good, you get absolute garbage out, right? So responsibility tends to talk about how are we ensuring that the data going into a model makes sense for what decisions you want that model to make for you. So if we go back to the that we'll go back to the beauty example, right? If my model has only been trained on Hispanic women, I'm never going to be able to match the skin tone of a Black woman, of a white woman, or of someone that doesn't fit that mold of the data that went in. But that's just one element, right? Getting the data right for your output is one part of it. Responsible AI is also about how are you ensuring that the questions being asked or the business problems being solved should be solved. Not everybody asks that question, right? Sometimes there's just this massive advancement that everybody's so excited about because they built something new. And in tech, we do that a lot, right? Like we get really passionate about our inventions and we don't stop to think about, well, should we actually solve for that? Do we actually want the outcome that we think we're driving towards? And then the third thing I'll say is ChatGPT, right? Which I use a ton, although admittedly now I'm starting to rethink it because I'm looking at what the data is saying about how it's being computed and the water usage behind it. It costs millions of dollars to actually run the model and train the model. And every time, according to an article I read this weekend from Fortune, every time you run 5 queries, which is about the average of how many questions somebody puts into it, it's using the equivalent of 1 bottle of water. And that doesn't sound like much, but when you look at the adoption rates and you see that they hit 1 million users faster than any other app ever in the history of technology, you realize that's millions and millions of gallons of water or liters of water on a daily basis that weren't planned for. Microsoft just reported a 34% increase in water usage. Google reported a 20% increase in water usage. And we're not talking about that side of it, right? We're solving all of these really interesting things. And don't get me wrong, I love it. The outcome is really important, but we have to do it in a way that's sustainable. Otherwise, we're going to solve a problem and create an entirely
another
new
problem, right?
Yeah.
That we probably still rely on ChatGPT to come up with a solution for us.
That's possible.
Which
that's
means
totally
we're going to use more water in the future, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's very interesting. I think that's big drawbacks. And also there are a lot of ethical questions that comes along with it, right? And I was watching Elon Musk driving his self-drive like Tesla, and it was all fine and smooth. But then somehow like there's some issues, right? I think the car saw that the green light came up from the wrong lane and almost, started driving it. But then good that, he kind of interfered with that. But imagine what if the car really hits somebody, right? Who's going to be responsible for that? Are there any organizations or laws being placed to resolve issues like that at the moment?
Regulation hasn't happened yet. Most tech companies, mine included, think that we need it, but we need it in conjunction with the people that are inventing it, because regulators just don't, when you're not in this space, you can't think fast enough to figure out what you need to put in place. So I think it's this combination and partnership between industry and between legal entities that can help actually protect everybody. I think there are some good frameworks in place, and there's a lot of organizations trying to do this responsibly, whether it's AI for Good. There's a couple of different AI ethics organizations. And most companies that I work with, we have manifestos. So this is actually one of the things that I did when I first started in AI and inside of Intel. We wrote a manifesto that says, here's how we think about AI usage, not only within our own companies, within our own company, but how are we using AI to then build products for other people? And it's a series of questions that, should we actually be answering this question? How did the data get sourced? What sort of checks and balances are we putting in it, right? Because it's similar to a multi-branch government system. If you don't have a checks and balance, you have the prisoners guarding themselves, and that's dangerous, right? But you get these companies that really do want to do good things, so they put some limitations on themselves, and I think that's awesome. Google's a really good example, right? What was it, 4 or 5 years ago, they built a language model internally that got so powerful. It was a self-learning language model, meaning they taught computers to talk to each other. But because it was self-learning, the computers figured out how to be more efficient in talking to each other. And by the time it progressed, the people that wrote the model couldn't understand it anymore. They were speaking an entirely made-up language that made zero sense. And to Google's credit, they shut the whole thing down. right?
That is
Like, but
very scary.
it is. It's super scary. But the reason I bring that up is not the scare factor, it's the response factor. Right? You want to be working and partnering with companies that actually take those types of responses, because the ones that hide it under the rug, or it comes out because an employee got freaked out and then they leak it, that's way worse. Right? Google was super upfront about it, and I give them a lot of credit for that.
I think I saw in an interview with the CEO of OpenAI as well. Like, I think the reporter kept on asking him questions like that too. He's like, "Oh, what if somebody searches for how do I make an atomic bomb?" Right? Should you even be advising people to even start, giving the answers to that, or should you just be like, "I don't know what that is," or something like that, right? Because it really goes along with, yeah.
Sam's been a really big, I mean, he's been on Capitol Hill in the United States. Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, if you don't know. But he's been a big part of that fusion, right? That partnership between regulators and the industry, because I mean, their GPT-4 is the most advanced model available right now for people to play with. I'm pretty convinced there's other companies that have more advanced. They just haven't released them. But Sam, to his credit, has been really open about, what can we do and how can we work together. He's not trying to solve this in a vacuum, and I think that's important.
I think it is. I think the fact that he's working with the government, with different organizations, the openness to it, right? It's part of the charm. And also, I think the reporter kept on pressing about the scary factors about using AI in our everyday life. But I think he's actually seeing this from a more positive way. I'm sure this is what you're trying to do with Intel, like what you said, put in the what is it called? What do you call it? The mandate, the stuff,
manifesto.
the manifesto. Sorry, that I just butchered out. But
nah, it's all good. So here's, I think Sam and a lot of the folks that are in the industry, myself included, we look at artificial intelligence as a tool, right? Any tool can get misused. If I have somebody with a malicious intent take a hammer, they can misuse that hammer. Otherwise, that hammer is a wonderful building tool for any number of items, right? It's not any different with AI. It's the same with compute in general, right? You put compute for good use, and you can solve the world's biggest problems. You put compute into the hands of people that have really bad intents, I can't stop that, right? So the only thing that we can do as companies and as technology citizens is try and prevent it from getting into those people's hands. And that's what most companies, mine included, are trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds great. I think my next question is about putting in the prompt, right? I think, and also personalization, because obviously I was blaming Chat for not coming up with a question that sounds like me. So I was like, how about I put in my name? So Chat, tell me about Brittany Lee and the way she writes. And then Chat is like, I don't really know who you are. So maybe it was the way that I prompt the question wrong. So you could have really learned, the way I talk and stuff like that. But, it could be, maybe it could just be, I don't know, how does the personalization work? Right? Was my prompt wrong?
No, your prompt probably wasn't wrong, because it came up with good questions. It just didn't sound like you.
Right.
So where you're trying to take it is, how do you get to a more personalized version of that model, right? Because right now the ChatGPT model is trained on the internet. So it's trained on, the 200 or 2 billion people that have contributed to the internet, if not more, which means it has no voice other than what you tell it. So I bet if you go back and say, write me a bunch of questions on AI in the tone of a California surfer dude, right? You're going to get a very different response, because there is enough examples to be able to then create that. There's actually companies, though, to your point, that are starting to build what are called tuned models, where they're a little bit more focused. It's kind of like hyper-personalization in marketing, right? If you want to go target or hyper-segment a set of audiences, then you can tune or focus your marketing in that certain space. There's companies that are now trying to do that with language models, to where you can then input, a bunch of, if you're an author, all of what you have written, and then it can start to give you feedback in your tone of voice. But that is, I think, a longer process, because one, it's super expensive to go do. Training those models, like I said, millions of dollars. The compute is hard to get access to. And there's not a big enough market yet. I think there will be, but I don't think it exists yet to have enough people actually go do that on a mass scale.
I see. Well, I do think that education does take it does take education for everybody to learn how to enter, the right prompt. I think yesterday at the AI session, right, like the lady from X Microsoft was mentioning about the creative industry, right? They're creatives. They're not really good articulating their words, but it became a big problem for them, right? So I think definitely these type of education that needs to be rolled out, and everybody can learn upon it. Yeah.
I've talked to a number of college kids lately, and that's what they want to do. They're
Right.
actually starting to create curriculum around prompt engineering. So if you're already in the industry, you can go take classes on how to use this. Because honestly, if you're in the industry, you should use it in any one of these industries because it'll just make you more efficient. Now, do it responsibly and ethically, right? My rule is can't be unethical, immoral, or illegal, and everything else you can go have some creative license with.
And also, I want to touch upon critical thinking, right? Because I think in our conversation, you mentioned that you would want your kids to actually start using ChatGPT, because, just prompting different things, preparing a party or preparing the essays and stuff like that, it's so easy. So, but then I guess my question was, how do they form the critical thinking to begin with? Because they grew up in that environment, right? How do they differentiate?
So I actually think kids should use it, but I think they should use it with oversight. I tend to be a big believer that if you don't teach people how to use the tools, then they figure it out on their own, and it's not necessarily the way that you would hope that they use the tools. So I'm a big believer in actually putting some of these tools into education. But to your point, right? Let's go back to your prompt question. You had to go back in and read it and figure, oh, that doesn't sound like me. I would never say those words. You had to actually put some thought into, well, what would make sense? You had to turn it into a storyline so that you guys didn't all fall asleep on us, right? Um, that takes the thought and that requires that critical thinking to come through. So some of the teachers I've talked to, the way that they're doing it is absolutely use ChatGPT, use Bard, pick your favorite, write your outline. Get started, right? Get yourself 50% of the way there, because if you can at least jumpstart that white piece of paper process, you are helping yourself be more efficient. But if you actually read through what it comes back with, it's not solid, right? You have to put some original thought into it. Otherwise, you can tell that it was written by ChatGPT. There's also some tools out there now that can tell whether or not it's an AI driven report. So you have to start, again, as technology, you start playing with it and somebody breaks it and they build a new tool to get around that break. And then somebody breaks that, they build a new tool to get around that. But if you don't teach kids how to use it, then you don't have those thought processes around, ooh, how do I break what's been fit, or how do I fix what's been broken to get that next set of inventions? Because the piece that scares me more than anything is when we rely on the output of output of output of a generative AI model, meaning it starts training on stuff, other words that I would choose to use instead, on garbage, and then it starts to spit out output, right? Because it's not necessarily giving you a real answer. It's not giving you fact. It's giving you what it thinks is fact. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed. So if you start training on generated data, you're actually putting garbage into your model. That's what scares me. And if you don't teach kids how to go do that and bring in then their own thought and their own research to ensure that it's fact, you end up with really scary outcomes, in my opinion.
So basically, you still need to train your children in terms of the critical thinking, the research bit on their own, and then they will have the comparison of, oh, what is the experiences when I use ChatGPT as opposed to, using my kind of knowledge, right, just to make the judgment call and things like that. So looking to the future in our everyday life, where do you see AI is fitting, it's in our future? What are the industry that you think that should gear up on the AI adoption?
Well, relevant to this, I think AI is going to help esports pretty extensively. We've already seen companies start to bring in AI to help reduce toxicity within gaming, and I think that's wonderful. Anytime you can
How do they
increase
do that
inclusivity.
toxicity? Just addiction? Or
It's less addiction. It's more about the chat and it's
right?
language, and it is a really hard problem to solve because you've got to solve for slang and you've got to solve for sarcasm, and every new week there's some new term that they're coming out with. But that problem is one that's worth solving for because it's been a pretty tough environment for certain demographics of people. So anytime you can make things more inclusive, I think that's a really big opportunity. Um, I think people are going to get time in their life back. I don't know how many of you meal plan food prep. I do. I have to, because I have like one time during my week that I can actually go to a grocery store and figure out, or order online and have food delivered and then cook. So that used to be a multi-hour process, because you'd go figure out what recipes you wanted, and then you got to figure out what you got to buy or what you got to order, and then it all shows up and you got to cook it all, right? I can now go in to any number of language models and say, okay, make me a meal plan for 4 people for 4 nights to do these types of things. And oh, by the way, I have a picky 5-year-old, so factor that in too. And then spit it into a grocery list for me with quantities. My multi-hour event now takes me 5 minutes. It is the best time saver of my life, right? And I think that, I mean, it's a simple example, but I think we're going to see more of that, where people get more of their time back to go be critical, go use critical thinking skills to solve some other problem, or go spend more time with their family, or do whatever it is you love to do, because we're going to take some of those routine and rote parts of their day out.
I love it. I think it's, at the end of the day, it is true increase efficiency in our life, and get us away from computers and spend more time with the ones that we love, who we want to be with, right? So we're running out of time, but I have last question. Any suggestions on my mother, not getting caught by the AI or getting a speeding ticket?
Put her in a self-driving car that prevents her from going too fast.
Or ask her not to drive anymore.
Or not drive. Yes, those are the options.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Please, everybody, round of applause. If you have any questions, make sure to ask Alexis offline.